Now, we are going to quickly look at what they call poetry. All right, what's poetry? Primarily, the basic and foremost definition of poetry is that it is that genre of literature that speaks in double language. All right, every poem says one thing but mean another. That's what poets do. Okay, when they say one thing, they end up meaning another. For example, this poet they call Kofi Awuno. In his poem, he calls, you know, the weaver bird, written against the background of colonialism. All right, when he says the weaver bird came to our house and built its nest on our only tree, that we did not want to send it away. He said it came from the west. All right, he started preaching salvation to us that own the house. So obviously, we will know that it is not actually the weaver bird that he's talking about. Weaver bird there speaks in double language. Weaver bird as a bird, and weaver bird meaning, you know, the colonial masters. Build its nest on our only tree. That nest for bird and nest meaning African continent. Okay, he said in the same poem that we supervise the egg laying. The egg there has double meaning. Egg produced by, you know, birds, and then the egg there, which also represents what the alien or strange laws that the colonial masters have come to hash on us that we are unable to, cope with. All right, so that's poetry, uh, basically. Now, what makes up poetry is not what is said, but the way it is said, just like the way literature itself is. Okay, so it is the manner in which the subject matter is, you know, driven that results in literature. It is not so much what is said, but it is so much how it is said. All right, so that's that. So the subject matter is, secondary. What is primary to poetry is the method. So it is the method that captures attention much more than the subject matter. All right, which of course is what literature is, all about. Then away from there, let's look at some other definitions by, some literary scholars. Someone like William Wordsworth in his book he calls Lyrical Ballads, all right, has defined poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Okay, then we talk about someone like Romano Segudu in his book he calls The Story of Poetry. In page 4, he says that poetry is a method of literary expression that suggests by means of imagery, rhythm, and then sound. Okay, now away from there, we are going to be looking at the different types of poetry, which is basically the topic. Different types of poetry. Number one, we have what they call the sonnets. What's sonnet? Sonnet is typically a traditional poem of 14 lines of iambic pentameters. All right, 14 lines of iambic pentameters, usually having a definite rhyme scheme. Okay, yes, and what do I mean by sonnets are usually written in iambic pentameter? That means each line of a sonnet is made up of 10 syllables. Well, all right. William Shakespeare, for example, wrote a total of 154 sonnets, and the most popular is Sonnet 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? By the time you count the syllables in Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? It is 10. So most of the lines in a sonnet are usually in iambic pentameters. Let's also look at John Milton's poem. It's called On His Blindness. When I considered how my life is spent, that line again is made up of iambic pentameters, 10 syllables. Okay, and then sonnets obviously started in Italy with a man called Giacomo da Lentini. Giacomo da Lentini is credited to have written over 200 sonnets in about 13th century, but sonnet was not popular. Sonnet was made popular in the 14th century by a man called Francesco Petrarca, who was later referred to as Petrarch. Little wonder Italian sonnet is named after him as a Petrarchan sonnet. So that means we have two basic types of sonnet. We have the Italian sonnet, otherwise called the Petrarchan. Then we also have the English sonnet, otherwise called Shakespearean, Elizabethan, or uh, English sonnet, Shakespearean, or Elizabethan. Okay, yes. And then let's look at the differences between the two sonnets, Italian and English, by means of the rhyme scheme. Italian sonnet is made up of what they call octave and a sestet. The octave of an Italian sonnet is the first 8 lines that will highlight the subject matter, and it rhymes ABBA, ABBA. Then the sestet, the concluding 6 lines, provides solution, and it rhymes CDE, CDE, or sometimes CDC, CDC. Yes, and then the concluding sestet of an Italian sonnet is always made up of 3 tacets then. So if I say CDE, CDE, that's 2 tacets. Now what's tacet? Standard of 3. 3 into 2, that's 6. Okay, so that's that for the sonnets known as Italian sonnet. Then let's look at English sonnet. English sonnet is made up of 3 quatrains and a couplet. What's a quatrain? It's a standard of 4 lines. So the rhyme scheme is ABAB first quatrain, CD second quatrain, EF third quatrain. Then the concluding words couplets is just 2 lines stanza, and that couplet of an English sonnet is otherwise called the gemelle. Alright, so that's that for sonnets. Then away from there, we are going to be looking at what they call dramatic monologue as a type of poetry. What's a dramatic monologue? It is just a one-sided conversational poetry in which there is a speaker, and there is a listener. But the listener is always a silent listener. He or she doesn't respond. The person may or may not even be there. Okay, but they talk using apostrophe, directly addressing, an audience that would not respond. Okay, that's why it is said to be one-sided conversational. It is a dramatic monologue. A good example is Good Morrow by John Donne, where that woman is being praised very early in the morning, but she appears to be listening right in the room with her lover, but she isn't responding. Okay, we have copious examples like Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. Then we have this poem to Raid Out the Treasure Trove by Lade Wasonu. So these are good examples. The opposite of a dramatic monologue will now be dramatic poem. Dramatic poem is a poem rendered in form of drama. It's rendered in form of drama because it has characters and dialogue. Alright. A good example is Streamside Exchange, a poem by Professor John Pepper Clark Bekederemo, where there is a conversation between a bird and a boy at the riverside. The boy appears to be looking for the mother, and he inquires from the bird as to the whereabouts of his mother, and the bird replies that the mother of the boy is already dead. So the boy says, and I quote, little bird, sitting all day long on grass over vales, sing a song to me of all that past. Will my mother come back today? And the bird replies, you shall not know, you cannot know, and should not bother. Tides and markets come and go, and so shall your mother. So that obviously means that people gather in the market and they leave. So this world is a marketplace. People come here and then they leave. So obviously the boy has been told by the bird that the mother has already gone to the world beyond. Little wonder the boy does not respond anymore, knowing full well that the mother is already dead or late. Okay, so that's that. Another example is telephone conversation by Wole Soyinka. Conversation between a white landlady and Soyinka himself here. Alright, written against the backdrop of racism. So that's that. So away from there, we also have what they call epithalamion. What's epithalamion? Epithalamion is a poem that celebrates a successful wedding. Alright, a successful wedding. This epithalamion was first of all coined in the year 1594 by a man called Edmund Spenser, when he first of all married his wife called Elizabeth Boyle. So he quickly wrote that poem to celebrate that wedding. But since then, any poem now written to celebrate a wedding is called epithalamium. But if it's an impending wedding that has not taken place, we refer to it as prothalamion. Okay, so that's that. In my next video, we are going to look at some other forms of poetry.